Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. Today we are very excited, Greg, because we have been long awaiting the arrival of Faithful and True's Administrator Sheri Trautmann. Sheri, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
We've been very excited to have you come. You know, this is an idea that we came up with that we thought that you, our loyal listeners and viewers, might enjoy. When you call Faithful and True and call our main number, in most cases, you're going to hear Sheri's lovely voice on the other line, and she's so good at processing all the requests that we get here at Faithful and True.
Yeah, we're getting ready to start a new series. You know how we like series here at Faithful and True. And so what we're going to be doing is a series on questions. What are the questions that people ask? And so over the next several podcasts, we're going to be inviting our team members in to talk about either questions that they hear most often, or maybe a question that was important for them in their own journey, or just a question that they have personally that maybe they would like to have asked and answered. And so as we began, it seemed like the perfect place to start, to have both you and Sheri, because you are the front lines. You are the invitation that people first hear to consider Faithful and True as a resource. And so much of what you do is to answer the questions that people have. So I just thought this would be a great place to start.
Well, we're excited to have Sheri with us because, as you said, Greg, Sheri and I have the role of answering the phones. When Sheri's on the phone and it rolls over to me, that's usually an indication that she's busy, hard at work, helping someone else. And then on Fridays, when Sheri is off, then I handle all of the administrative duties that she normally does. So, Sheri, what do you think? It's pretty exciting, isn't it? Huh?
Yeah.
What would be your, because you've been here like 5 years longer than I have, and I've been here 10 years, which means you started as a young child.
I was 12 years
You were
old.
very young when you started at Faithful and True. Just a very young lady. But I know that we constantly get compliments about how compassionate you are, how well you answer their questions, you handle their concerns, because let's face it, we never quite know the condition of the person calling in, do we?
No, that is true. And I do realize that when people call Faithful and True, it's quite often their first step in finding help.
Yeah.
And I'm mindful of that, and I want them to feel that this is a place of safety for them, that we take their confidentiality as a priority, and that there's hope. And so I'm hoping that is what they feel when they first call us here.
Well, one of the things that you just mentioned is this idea that it is our desire that when someone calls Faithful and True, that they're able to talk to a person. That we have a lot of information on the website, and there will be many people that all of their questions are answered by reading the website, and they can register for a workshop and never even call the office. But what we also know is there are some people that just benefit. They need to have a conversation with someone, or they have a specific question. And so it is our goal that when the phone rings during business hours, there's somebody there to answer it. But what I also know is there's a high commitment that if someone does have to leave a voicemail, that we'll get back to them as quickly as possible. Randy already mentioned that you've been here for 15 years. So just tell us a little bit about how you found Faithful and True and how you started working here all those years ago.
Okay. Well, Debbie Laaser was an acquaintance of mine, and she reached out to me 15 years ago to see if I'd be interested in doing some help here at the office. At the time, it was just Mark and Debbie and a handful of clients, and they just needed some administrative help. I was just in a transition at the time that she called. My background is nursing, so I was in a transition with my nursing job, and I thought, I should think about maybe seeing if I can do something else besides nursing. And so I took Debbie up on her offer. It was a very part-time, 3 days a week, maybe half days at a time. It was just Mark and Debbie and a handful of clients, and 15 years later, we've got a team of 10 clinicians, and we schedule about 100 clients a week, and it's been a real privilege and exciting for me to see how we've grown in those 15 years.
Well, and that is a huge thing to acknowledge, is just the change and the transformation that's occurred over those 15 years of what it started with just this smaller opportunity with Mark and Deb, and now all of the scheduling, all of the requests, all of the phone calls as we navigate the bigger team here at Faithful and True. You mentioned that you professionally were trained as a nurse. Are there any of the skills of nursing that you find that you resource here in your work, administrating and organizing and then answering the phones at Faithful and True?
Yeah, I worked as a nurse for 15 years before coming to Faithful and True, and I think what is true is once you're a nurse, you're always a nurse. You never really take that hat off, I feel like. But I'm hoping that my experience in nursing, the majority of my time I was working in oncology and hospice, that experience has allowed me to, my hope is to be more compassionate when talking with people and having empathy around their pain. And I think my nursing career has helped me in that way.
Right. Well, and even because you were in a very significant, painful experience with oncology and hospice, it does create a sense of compassion and sensitivity to step into these very painful places. We often talk about the fact that when people's lives explode, or if there's been a disclosure or some sort of information has come to light, for many people it does feel as if their life is ending, or their marriage is dying, or whatever they thought their life was going to be was coming to an end. And so for both of you, having a safe, compassionate presence in those moments is incredibly important. Randy, is there anything that is surprising? You mentioned that you've been here for 10 years. Is there anything that is surprising about the work and changes that you've seen in the last 10 years?
I'd have to admit the fact, Greg, that when I started, the only apprehension that I had was that it's such an impactful line of work. I mean, the people that we work with, when they call, Sheri kind of hit the nail on the head when she said so many people are just so desiring hope. They want to hear that there's a sense of hope by working with Faithful and True. And as I thought about when I first came on board, gosh, a man crashing and burning due to his unwanted sexual behaviors, the devastation that it's having for him personally, or for his marriage, or for his family, or his career. And I was leery of, is every day going to be painful? Is every day going to be filled with heartbreak? And it's turned out to be quite the opposite, because in the end what you see is that it's some of the most important work that I think we've ever done. Because when you see a couple come to us who are a step away from their marriage exploding and going, not working out, instead you're seeing this process that Mark and Debbie Laaser have put out a program, and you and Beth and our entire staff, that through working the program at Faithful and True and working with our therapists and counselors and attending our workshops, that the end result can be so positive and so healing. And so then when you see a couple that was about to have a devastating end to their marriage, you see them reunited. You see their marriage really saved, and so that is so encouraging, and it just leaves me kind of grateful on a consistent basis, because you're seeing lives being positively influenced by the work being done here.
Yeah, well, it's even, my guess is in taking appointments, those early appointments where it feels heavy and there's dread, and everyone that comes into the office in those early days may be carrying significant weight, but the longer they're here, then you start to experience that hope. And instead of dreading my next appointment, it's I'm looking forward to my next appointment, because I really do see and I'm experiencing this transformation that I desire. We talked about questions, so my guess is a lot of the questions that y'all get are about the logistics of how does it work at Faithful and True. What are some of the typical things that people want to know about the work and the ministry that we do at Faithful and True?
Well, I think they're initially looking for resources. So that's how can Faithful and True help me? So that I think is the thing that I think that's why they're calling us to begin with. Logistically, a lot of questions about the workshop, is their availability, a lot of travel and hotel information, questions that they have. And again, a lot of it is on our website, but I think the fact that we are available to answer them in person is important, and that is a lot of what the calls are that come through.
Right. I see us kind of as a team, and I know that Beth is the same way, because a lot of times you'll have that initial conversation with someone who's curious about the workshop or wants to register but has that question. And then what you'll do is, if necessary, you'll send them my way, and as the director of the men's workshop, and Beth is the director of the women's workshop, if there's a specific question they have, then we're able to answer those questions for them. And a lot of times the questions have to do with a particular circumstance. A lot of times it's about travel. I couldn't get a flight until this time. Is it too late to come? Or I need to leave at this time. Is that okay? And so we want to help people, give them the information that they need to make the best decision they can make about whether or not the workshop in that particular month is a good fit for them.
Well, and because Sheri and my offices are just a few feet away down the hall, we have, we're oftentimes kind of kidded by the staff because our internal intercom system has been going, hey, Sheri,
Right.
whatever. But we get the chance, just by nature, of overhearing what we will sometimes be saying to a caller. And I can't tell you the number of times that we establish that we are not therapists or counselors, because the questions that come our way can be quite, they're the caller's desiring direction. And we'll make it clear that I really appreciate your call. I'm glad you're reaching out to us, and I'm not a therapist or a counselor, but I can put you, in touch with one of them.
Well, and when we are in pain, we want to try to share or offload that pain as much as possible.
Right.
And so my guess is there are a lot of people, without even realizing it, are starting to tell you their story of why they're looking for faithful and true. And to be able to identify, we do want to be with you, we do want to support you, and this isn't the place to begin to share your story, but here are some resources that might be helpful for you.
Well, and the questions can be difficult, can't they, Sheri? I mean, we can be asked some very difficult questions. That's where we don't purposely eavesdrop, but I'll hear you give an answer and go, oh, that's a good answer to that question, because sometimes you are scrambling to say really the right message that will be received with compassion, because we're both compassionate people. The entire theme of everything at Faithful and True is based in our empathy and understanding the pain that they've been through, because so many of our staff have their own healing journey story.
Well, and I would absolutely use the word compassion to describe both of you. That when someone does call, it's our hope and it's my belief that first conversation that they have, even if it's about logistics, even if it's about a registration process, there is this sense of, we are glad that you are calling. We do believe that this is a good place for you to be. One of the things, though, is we know that this can be a difficult job, a challenging job. So what are some of the challenges that you face in trying to do your job day in and day out?
Other than working with me.
Well, I think you, Randy, can attest to this. I think the biggest challenge that we're experiencing right now is the number of calls that we're getting, folks that are looking for counseling help. And, right now the caseloads that our clinicians are having with the number of clients that they're managing, many have had to put a hold on taking new clients, or the wait list is, 10 weeks out before they can get in. So that, I think, for me right now is the biggest challenge, is to have to let people know that that's the reality of our circumstances right now. I do try to think of things that we can offer them and not the things that we can't. And certainly, this podcast is one platform that I'm always letting folks know about. I'm so thankful that we have this as a way for people to get good information on what we do here. And then, of course, our workshops. I'm always letting people know that 99% of the time our clinicians are going to encourage you to come to a workshop, whether that be a husband or a wife or a couple. And if they're looking for our help sooner than later, generally our workshops are what we can offer them.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and just from our experience, we know that when a man who's looking for help turns to us, and gets that first appointment with you or Jim Farm or Chris Hardesty, the number one recommendation that they're going to be given is to register and come to the 3-day Men's Journey workshop. And it's hard to not have them have the perception that that's a marketing ploy or that we're just trying to sell them on coming to the workshops. But what we know from our experience over all of these years is that it's the most highly recommended best first step on any man's healing journey.
Right.
Because you usually say it so well. What is the equivalent? That 3-day intensive workshop has the equivalent of
Like 6 months.
like
of-
6 months of one-on-one counseling. And when they realize that, then they're able to go, oh, the registration fee is more than reasonable when I put that into perspective.
Right. And I one of the things I'm very thankful for, especially with the men's workshop, is because we do them every month, a man really doesn't have to wait that long until the next one is available.
Exactly.
And we have had men who hear about it on a Tuesday and show up on
On
Thursday
Thursday.
to be at the workshop. So we know that it is accessible, and occasionally it does fill up and we have to move or let somebody know the next available one is in a month. But even then, it's not waiting significantly long in order to be able to get that resource. And like you said, Sheri, we do want people to know that there are books that are available. We have the online bookstore, and we try to put information on our website that can be helpful as people are trying to determine their next step. And so it is difficult to name the limit that we aren't able to provide one-on-one counseling right now. And we are also thankful that there are other resources that we're able to offer. So in the time that y'all been here, is there a consistent question that people have that you find yourself answering over and over again that's not logistics? Or is there a question that you typically try to answer before they have the opportunity to ask it? Is there something that you have found helpful to share, even if they're not asking the question yet?
Well, I think Randy and I talked about this earlier. Confidentiality is a big concern for a lot of people that are coming our way. So, whether it's an implied question or I can sense that they're concerned about their confidentiality, that is something that I usually say up front that I think I mentioned it earlier, that is a priority of ours, and we want them to make sure that they do feel safe here. It's not necessarily the question that I get all the time. I do sense that regularly with people,
Right.
though, and I want them to be aware of that.
Yeah, well, and maybe without asking the question, the bigger question is it safe for me to come?
Sure.
Is it safe in that it's going to be confidential? And a lot of people may not recognize this, but even though we call it a workshop, we put the same parameters on it that we do an individual counseling session.
That is correct.
We implement the recovery messages of confidentiality, and part of that is that safety piece. And we emphasize that at the beginning of every workshop, that we expect not just confidentiality from our staff, but we also expect it from the other people that are going to be there, because we know that if someone doesn't feel safe, they're not going to be vulnerable. And if they're not vulnerable, they're not going to be able to experience transformation. And so maybe without asking it, one of the questions that you get is it safe for me to come? My guess also is there is some question about the faith experience. Is this a Christian organization, or what is the role of faith? So what is it that you want people to understand if they are asking about what is the role of faith at Faithful and True?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do get that. I always let folks know that we are a Christian counseling center. We do feel that people's faith experience is an important piece in their recovery, and we are sensitive to where they're at in their faith journey. Some maybe don't have a relationship with Jesus. Does that mean they are not a good fit for what we do here? And definitely, I feel like there's a place for them here. We are very sensitive to where they're at in that journey. And that's how I answer that question.
Right.
Well,
do you have anything else to
Well,
say?
no, that's a great point. And back to the earlier point about confidentiality, just for a second, sexual addiction or struggles with these issues are not confined to a certain demographic. And you see that in those that attend our workshop, because men come to us from not only across the country, but from around the world. So when Sheri taps into her previous experiences, she's got, we're encouraging her to someday write a book, just because the experiences have been from someone coming from China or Russia or Canada or every corner of the United States, and the ages. We try to have some parameters there, because more and more in today's world of technology, we are being approached by younger and younger potential clients. And so it's normally starting about age 18 that you're comfortable in bringing them into a group as diverse as the men that come here for the workshop. But 18 to 80 can be the age range, and professions from every level that you can think of. And sometimes it is a very high-profile CEO of a very high-ranking company. And so you always put the men at ease and explain that confidentiality is going to be here every minute of the 3 days. And I think that gets established so quickly that you see this community being built among those in attendance. And the young ones are welcomed by the older ones, that you see almost kind of a brotherhood that starts to develop there. But as Sheri said about faith, we welcome people of every faith. We've had rabbis, we've had priests, we've had just average, everyday believers and non-believers, and they're all welcome here at Faithful and True.
Well, one of the things that we try to be clear about is this is our faith, that this is what is, for those of us in recovery, that our faith was an important part of our recovery, and we're not going to impose that on anybody else, that this is our faith, our experience, we're going to share it, we're going to lead out of it, and we're not going to impose it on somebody else. And we also know that a lot of people who come to our workshop and are part of Faithful and True come with very difficult and painful stories around their own faith experiences, and we certainly don't want to intensify that through some sort of judgment or being rigid about something. So we do want there to be a sense of safety, even in bringing whatever faith I have or don't have to the experience itself. Is there anything else about safety that people want to know about other than the confidentiality?
The one thing I was going to mention is a lot of times if men are reaching out, and I'm a woman answering the phone, and they have questions about the workshop and whether it's a good fit for them and so forth, I can sense right away and that certainly they're not going to want to get into their story with me. And so that's why having you, Greg, as a resource to say, hey, I'm here to answer your logistical questions. If you have more specifics, then connecting with Greg would be a good next step for you if as you're trying to navigate whether the workshop is a good place for you. So I want people to know that you are a resource around that, and not for men to feel uncomfortable calling,
Right.
Knowing that I'm the first point of contact, and there are other resources for them to tell their story and ask questions.
Well, and another point about just part of our process is we don't allow someone to register for the workshop for somebody else.
Right.
And
That is
sometimes
true.
it may just be a practical thing where the husband has agreed to come. In fact, the husband wants to come,
Yeah.
and the wife wants to call to take care of it, to just make it happen. And what we want people to understand is if you are calling for the workshop, that it will be important that you're registering yourself.
Correct.
And sometimes a spouse will call with questions. Maybe it'll be questions about the logistics of it or something like that. But ultimately, we want the person who's attending the workshop to be the person that registers for it.
Yes.
The other thing I just want to go back to quickly is this idea of there is the age range where we ask that someone be at least 18 years old. And typically 18 years old and in the end of their senior year in high school. And part of that is just a practical thing, that if someone is 18, then by the therapeutic community, they are treated as an adult. And so therefore that allows us to have a relationship with them without it having to go through their parents. And that creates safety for the 18-year-old, but it also creates some safety for us as we're supporting them. And what we know about recovery is this isn't something that someone can do for you, even if it's well-intended. A mom or a dad can't do recovery for a child. And so therefore, we want to have an independent relationship with the child as we support them in their own recovery journey. And so that's where that 18-year-old place comes from for young men that we know are struggling. And this is one of the ways that we're able to support them.
That also applies to the wives that are so desperate for their husband to get help. They'll call, because I think women are great researchers. So many times, the wife will have reached out, done all of the research, found us online, so a lot of times the first call will come from the wife saying, my husband has a problem,
Right, yes.
And he doesn't know it yet, but he needs you, and we appreciate that because many times, I just had it happen last week. The wife called first. We talked for an extended period of time, and by the time she was done, she was filled with so much more hope than she had when she first called later that day, and she made it sound like her husband was going to be so resistant because, as you are the first to know, Greg, so often the men are maybe in denial about the extent of their struggle. He called and was all on board for registering, and he'll be here Thursday morning.
Yeah,
So
that's great. Well, thank you for coming, and just the role that both of y'all do in being that welcoming presence. It's so much more than just the greeter at the front door. It is about almost more of a role of hospitality where you're creating a safe space for people to come and to be in one of the most difficult, painful, vulnerable places in their life. And so the work that you do truly is transformational. One of the things I love about Faithful and True is we are a team, and each of us have the parts that we play. And one of the images I've always loved is that image from the scripture where the friends bring their friend, the paralytic, to Jesus, and they carry him on a mat, and they go up to the roof, they cut a hole in the roof, and they lower their friend down to Jesus to be healed. And one of the images that I have for Faithful and True is we are all mat carriers. And in our own way, we pick up our edge of the mat, our corner of the mat, so that we can bring as many people as possible to the feet of Jesus so that they can be healed. And the contribution that y'all make is just amazing. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being with us as a guest / host, and so
double duty.
you're going to need to get double the pay.
Oh, I'm expecting a big uptick in the check again. But Sheri, thank you so much. I told you this wasn't going to be bad. Yeah, you handled it. You handled it beautifully. So, for those of you watching, we thank you for watching again. Our list and of loyal listeners is growing by leaps and bounds, and it's showing in the numbers. If you have not yet subscribed to the Faithful and True YouTube channel, we hope that you'll do that because we're now featuring these podcasts both in an audio format and a video format through YouTube, but we appreciate that. As we've been talking about, the Men's Journey Workshop is a transformative event that we offer every month here at Faithful and True. And then the Women's Journey Workshop and the Couples Journey Workshop we do about 3 to 4 times a year. We encourage you to look into the details of that at faithfulandtrue.com. Until then, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that this coming week for you is going to be a week filled with many blessings and with great vision.